create all these events. So Guna, thank you very much, and for always coming in for all the events, and it's always wonderful just speaking to you. So thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts and views on this topic, which I think it's a very interesting topic. And I've actually done some research on this. And because I find this to be so interesting and so relevant to us as mediators today. So for me, I feel that I want to start off with what is the heart of mediation first, before moving on to the spiritual and the soul aspect of it, which, of course, it's all interlinked and tied together. But for me, as a mediator, I think listening is indisputably a significant aspect of mediation. And for me, that could be expressed as the heart of mediation. That's the way I look at it. And the focus should be on deepening the mediator's capacity for listening, because this may actually support people in conflict to express themselves more openly and relate to each other more in a more deeper way, and enter into dialogue a dialogue with the parties and the mediator. So for mediators, finding the way to actually have this deeper listening powers, or even for the parties to listen to the mediator, both ways, it works both ways. It may actually involve developing awareness of their own concerns, their prejudices and assumptions, and setting them aside in order to create a receptive space open to the dynamics of conflict in dialogue. That means in a mediation scenario. So mediators, let me just share this slide, which is quite an interesting slide.
But Guna, you also have to tell us about yourself. That's also really important, because where you're coming from,
I see.
It's
Okay,
very
you want me to
important.
start off just a very quick introduction?
No, it doesn't have to be quick. It's because I'm telling you that is very important. That connection is also important. Yeah,
okay.
Please.
I'm from Malaysia. I am a mediator. I always profess myself to be a mediator first, as opposed to being an advocate and solicitor. I am an advocate and solicitor by training. I've been a lawyer for the past 33 years. But for me, my passion is mediation, because I believe in its success. I believe that it works. And I want to spread the word out, like to everyone, like what you are doing. It's immense what you're doing, Vikram, and I take my hats off to you. Honestly, respect. I mean, you have done so much for spreading the word around, and the things which you do and the time which you put in and the effort which you put in is remarkable, remarkable. So I must say that, although I have that passion for mediation, I don't have the time, the luxury of time which you have to do this. I mean, that's an excuse. That is an excuse, and you call it a lame excuse. But
Guna, you can't say luxury of time. I have to take out that time because I'm
yes.
okay. I just love it.
I know you're a peacemaker and a golfer, so you're foregone your golfing.
What about
time.
Work also. I don't take up everything that comes to me because of this reason. Because obviously this is important. This is really important for me.
Yeah. So coming back to what I do. So for me, of course, I practice mediation. I also teach mediation. So for me, it's something very close to my heart. And teaching has actually taught me a lot, because I do research and I look into areas which, like, this is a very interesting area, this topic. And sharing my views on this topic is something which I think I should share with my students in the future as well, because this is an eye-opener for me as well. So I think it's good that you came up with this topic, so that I can tie this up and relate this, and even carry out what I'm going to. I have to practice what I preach. So I'm going to try and incorporate some of the things I'm going to share with today with everyone, with you and everyone here listening in, into my mediation practice. So hopefully I can incorporate what I'm going to share here. And I think I have incorporated many of these things in many of the mediation sessions which I have conducted with so many parties. But I must make a more concerted effort to make sure that I incorporate this and be mindful of the heart, the soul, and the spirituality in mediation when I'm going to mediate. Okay,
that's really nice. That's very nice. Thank you. That'd be nice.
Yes. Yeah. So if I can just share the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So when we talk about listening, just now I was talking about listening skills. Let me just start my slideshow.
You can click the one on the left. Yeah, perfect. You'll have to click the one on the left, right, extreme on your right. From beginning you can start right to the extreme right on the other side. My left, yeah, this below that.
Yeah,
next to this. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, I want to share this quote which says, I believe we can change the world if we start listening to one another again. So I think listening is a very, as I said when I started earlier, that for me, I think this is the heart of mediation, listening. And mediators we are all facilitators in conflict resolution. So we may possess a capacity for listening which is more finely tuned than other professionals. I don't know, that's my view, because we are trained to listen. And to be a good mediator, we must have good listening skills. That's what we are taught as a mediator. And when they teach us mediation skills training, they include listening as a technique or a skill which a mediator should acquire. So they try and teach us these skills. But I believe personally that it is also inherent in certain people. So some people may are better listeners than others. So as mediators, I think we must make an extra effort to start listening attentively or deeply, the deep reception of what people are saying. So I want to move on to the next quote, where it says, our professional role as mediators often requires us to foster a deeply receptive capacity, and our work is made easier if we can create an atmosphere of listening in which the people with whom we are working are encouraged to attend, not just to us, but to each other. So I think as a mediator, we have this capacity to make people listen to one another and work together. So I think that is the heart of the mediation process. And in fact, if openness and recognition of each other's stories can begin through listening for people in conflict, then the hope of collaboration and a shared perspective is nurtured. So this is by Bush and Folger. So I want to take this to the next level. And when we are trained as mediators, we are always told, when we are taught listening skills, that we have to listen actively. And what is active listening? I wanted to share this. That's why I did this. I don't have many slides, but I actually wanted to show this particular slide. And I want to share this slide because I think it's a very interesting slide. It's a Chinese character, which actually refers to, in Chinese is, as you know, I'm half Chinese. So, so that's why I'd like to share this, not because I'm half Chinese, but because I think it captures the essence of listening with your heart, okay, and the heart of mediation. This particular Chinese character says, Ting. Ting means, in Mandarin, to listen, okay? So I don't read Chinese, but this apparently signifies the year, and this is the eye, and this is the heart. And this basically means giving oneself undivided attention. That means listening in a wholesome manner. So this particular Chinese character actually captures what I'm going to say. But listening with your heart, your eyes, your ears, and giving your utmost, the fullest attention to the parties during a mediation. So this character, as I said, closely resembles a deep receptivity of listening, which includes all these elements, okay? And when one listens with their heart, this portrays being attentive to the inner world of the speaker. So listening is the heart of mediation and involves listening for the total meaning, responding to the speaker's feelings, responding to the parties, reception of cues, which could be non-verbal cues. Because when we are speaking and when people speak, we are sending out signals. And these could be non-verbal signals, non-verbal cues, like body language and eye contact, etc. So these cues are sent out during the mediation process. So as a mediator, we must listen, learn how to listen receptively, active listening. So in mediation training, I mean, we do teach all this because I do a lot of training as well. And we teach this, and as I said earlier, we say that it's a skill which one has to acquire. And rather than actually just ticking the box, like in a toolkit, I think we need to, approach this in a manner in which we are able to actually practice this without making much effort. I think as a mediator, we should already be equipped with these skills. And we must start learning how to receive information in this manner, the deep receptive capacity in us to receive this information from the parties. And this involves being attentive to the inner world, involving listening for the total meaning of this capacity which I'm talking about, listening by giving your undivided attention. So as I said, we also look out for non-verbal signals which are significant, and this could go beyond what we can hear and may include visual and auditory cues beyond speech itself. So it's way beyond that. And if we consider what we are describing as the deeply receptive capacity of listening as one pole of the communication loop, then ensuring the status of listening is essential to building a healthy communication loop with the parties, which I think will make a huge difference during the mediation. So deep receptive listening is something which I think has a special quality that goes beyond the everyday view of a skill or type of behavior which we teach in the mediation, during mediation training, which we do. So this listening skill actually is very powerful. It holds a lot of power, although not in the way we often regard power. Okay, many people, especially mediators and others of the so-called helping professions like counselors and maybe even psychologists, we are orientated towards helping, giving advice, wanting to resolve problems, fix problems for people. But sometimes we need to listen to what people are saying. And I just want to share this mediation story, which, as I would put it. I recently did a mediation where the parties were very, very cold towards one another during the mediation. It was difficult to break their ice, and they were both very positional and didn't want to let go of their positions. And at the end of the day, the mediation was unsuccessful, although I tried my level best. But what I want to share is what one of the parties said to the other party towards the end of the mediation, before we terminated the mediation. And this person said, told the other party, it doesn't matter, Miss Mediator, that we didn't settle this matter today, but I feel satisfied with the process, because I think for the first time, the other party has listened to what I have said. And this mediation has given me the opportunity to put forward to the other party what I've been trying to tell him all this while. So that in itself is a success for me, although the mediation was unsuccessful, because for that party, being heard was very important. So for him, if we listen, we are always thinking of giving advice, offering help, but our listening doesn't have to have a motive. And it becomes totally empty and not receptive if the other parties don't see what we are saying, or are not listening, or not on the same page as us. But at least I was glad that I brought the two parties together and they listened to one another at the mediation, and hopefully they would have been able to iron out their dispute outside the mediation room later, after having listened to one another. Okay, so, but sometimes when we go into a mediation, I think the problem with us mediators is sometimes, I mean, I may be guilty of that as well. After reading some of the brief facts of the dispute, we go in with a preconceived idea of, oh, how am I going to resolve this, which is something which a mediator should never do. Okay, and I may have preoccupied concerns about other things. So I may be also concerned that maybe one side is more powerful than the other, that there's going to be a huge power imbalance, or one side might withdraw from the mediation because I can see that power imbalance in the room. Okay, so I'm having these preoccupied thoughts, say, so if I am going to do that, then I know this is not going to be very helpful, because I'm going to carry this concern into the mediation room, and it is really not going to be helpful, because I'm not going to be a good listener when I'm doing this. And this is going to affect the heart of the mediation process, because I'm failing to actually listen receptively or actively with my ears and eyes and heart. So to the outer world, to some extent, this will, all these things which is preoccupying me is actually bad for the mediation process. And we as mediators should try and shut out all these barriers. And some of the barriers, as I said, being preoccupied, being judgmental, being prejudiced, having a lack of attention because it's too complicated or too difficult to understand, or can't manage the power imbalance and, internal chatter in your mind, or what am I going to do next? So all these barriers to active listening is actually something which a mediator must avoid to actually conduct a successful mediation. So for me, I believe that is the heart of mediation. And effective listening skills should include being alert, being focused, avoiding distractions, and very importantly, being very patient. and avoid passing judgments, and sometimes keeping quiet, because sometimes we must know when to stop and when not to finish people's sentences, interrupting when we should not be interrupting. So all these things, and not jumping to conclusions, and remaining neutral throughout the mediation process. So I think that is very, very important. Now, moving on to spirituality and soul in mediation. Now, this one, I did do some research because I think this is so interesting. And I just want to share, of course, when people talk about spirituality, Vikram, one will say, a lot of people will say, oh, they think of the new age hippie or people, youth chanting peace and love and that kind of thing, or being a vegan or vegetarian, this is the new world kind of outlook, when you talk about spirituality. But I think in our context, in the context of mediation, it can be viewed as an internal process of moving towards increased understanding of the dispute, the understanding of what parties want, why parties are at the mediation table, and increase connectivity to connect people, and the inner peace which you will acquire. And really, that is the joy of doing mediation. Because when you mediate and you resolve a dispute, it is good for your soul, and it brings peace to everybody. And as a mediator, that is more satisfying than resolving a dispute, in court, or taking it to litigation and having a judgment in my hand for millions of dollars. That doesn't bring me satisfaction. I think resolving a dispute, especially a very acrimonious dispute, is very, very enriching for the soul. For me, I think that is really enriching for the soul and my spirit as well. So let me just share this definition by he's a social psychologist and a priest. He explains that spirituality is essentially the human search for meaning. All of us, all of the time, operate out of a sense of being connected to an inner core of meaning. Throughout life, we humans are exploring meaning, searching for it, and imposing it where we feel it doesn't exist. We are creatures of meaning, and the drive towards meaning comes from deep within, not just within ourselves, but also from deep within creation itself. So spirituality is planetary and cosmic as well as personal. So it means different things to different people, and it is connected to your inner self and what we are searching, what we are seeking. And in another quote from this book, The Spiritual Marketplace, Professor Wade Roof cites a definition of spirituality provided by a panel consisting of executives, educators, clergies, and community leaders. So this definition is a very interesting definition. He says, spirituality is a very difficult word to define. I really think so too. And an adequate definition would include reference to a relationship with something beyond myself that is intangible, but also real. It would recognize that spirituality is the source of one's values and meaning, and a way of understanding the world, and awareness of my inner self, and a means of integrating the various aspects of myself into a whole. I think it's a very interesting definition of spirituality. And for me, my spirituality does not require me to escape the world and go into meditation for 24 hours or seek refuge in some paranormal state so as to avoid the physical world. Actually, for me, spirituality asked me that I acknowledge that I have a soul. And this soul contains a spirit, an eternal spirit, an energy that can guide my actions. So it must make sense of my feelings and focus my attention. So with reference to my soul, I think my personality or ego will run the show. So to avoid that, to avoid my ego from running the show, because my ego is going to convince me that every man is for himself and that the purpose of living is to get as much as one can get for himself. So I must not be caught down or bogged down by that. Because when you look at the soul is defined as the center of the human person, the center of authenticity and meaning. I think yesterday, one of the speakers I was listening in, and she spoke about being authentic. Am I right, Vikram?
Yeah, Jody from Australia.
Yes, so she was talking about authenticity. And here, the definition of soul says that it is the center of the human person, the center of authenticity and meaning. So soul is the container of the spirit, the dwelling place where spirit is received from the cosmos and integrated into our own individual lives. So every human being has a soul with similar yearnings, I suppose, yearnings to love and be loved, to create, to live in peace. I suppose these are some of the yearnings which we as human beings have. And each of us at one time or another experience something that stimulates these yearnings. So our ability to listen to our soul without reacting to our emotions and feelings is something which is, I think, very difficult to practice, but which is required of a mediator, because we are not supposed to show our emotions when we are mediating, because we cannot be judgmental. We are not supposed to be prejudicial. We know that maybe there is, let's say, in a domestic dispute for custody, we know, I mean, some of the facts which reveal that the man is a bad father. I'm not gender biased here, but I'm just giving an example. And that the man has not spent time with the children, yet seeking custody of the kids, and has, maybe been abusive to the mother and the children. Yet we cannot take sides, because we have to control our emotions. Otherwise, we are not going to be a good mediator. We are not going to give our best to the mediation. So this is what I'm talking about. The soul cannot react to these emotions. So as we listen to our soul, we must begin to feel the eternal and divine within us. So we become more self-reflective and learn to discern between our ego and our soul's wants and desires. So the ego wants something else, whereas the soul may want something else and desire something else. So we also understand that our ego is that part of us that wants us to be unique, to be autonomous, to be independent, to be special. But we begin to see how our ego resists change. But as a mediator, we cannot cling on to ego. So when we are mediating, we have to remember that. And the more we listen to our soul, so as a mediator, I think one has to listen to their soul. Listen to your soul, the more we move towards the different way of looking at dispute. The perception is different. And this will connect us to the spiritual dimension and offer us a larger and more powerful perspective. So because in mediation, we are when interacting with the parties, we will seek to connect with their souls rather than their egos. But it is not easy at all, because, you know, during mediation, of course, the egos are going to come to the forefront. That is reality. So it is difficult to practice this in real life. I mean, knowing this definitions, etc., is easy to read about it, but actually practicing it, I think, is a huge challenge for a mediator. Huge challenge. And very interestingly, okay, I've ended my slides because I don't really have many slides. So let me stop the share here first and come back to you, Vikram, here. And I want to share that, of course, there are many models of mediation, as you know, as you're well aware. You have your facilitative model, which is the model which is practiced very widely around the world, and also the evaluative mediation model. But there's also this model called the transformative mediation model. And during my research into this topic, I came across this article, which actually talks about how spirituality can be practiced by mediators if they adopt the transformative mediation model, which is something promoted by Bush and Folger. And they proclaim that transformative mediation is the most promising model for individuals and society as a whole, because it involves changing not just situations, but changing people themselves, and therefore changing society as a whole. So it aims at creating a better world, not just in the sense of a more smoothly or fairly working version of what exists, but in the sense of a different kind of world. So the goal is a world in which people are not just better off, but better. So the occurrence of this transformation brings out the good in people, the highest level in people, the highest level of a human being. So instead of focusing only on reaching a resolution of the problem, in this model of this transformative mediation model, they recognize that people desire at a deep level to reach their highest potential, that is becoming of a fully developed human being. So they talk about transformation and moral growth through empowerment and recognition of each other during the mediation process. And this allows parties to address the conflict and remain focused on the spiritual opportunities for growth that it holds. I mean, of course, it's easier said than done. I think this is not going to be easy to transform people during a mediation session, to recognize each other's empowerment and bring them to that next level. I think it's really difficult. It's not going to be easy to do that. So I don't know whether this, I don't practice this model of mediation, but as I said when I first started, that maybe I have to make certain changes in the way I mediate. after doing research on these areas, which I think will be very helpful, but may not be easy to practice and may require training. I don't know. Yeah, but I think it is a very interesting way of looking at the dispute. So I just want to share certain parts of the mediation process and certain spirituality concepts from different religions. I, being a Hindu, I just want to share how it may tie up with mediation. Okay, and let me start by talking about the mediation process. I'm not going to go through the whole process, but I'm just going to talk about certain parts of the process of mediation. And the first stage, of course, we all know in a mediation process is where the mediator gives his opening statement and tries to establish rapport with the parties and trust with the parties. And that's not an easy thing to do. I mean, establishing rapport and trust. And I think yesterday the speaker also touched on trust issues and tied it up with authenticity. And as the mediator enters the mediation process, so practicing the spiritual art of compassionate awareness will be very helpful to the mediator. So the Buddhist practice of karuna, okay, or compassion, karuna is compassion, which involves taking the time to be empathetic and to focus one's attention on of the participants in the room, which we are supposed to do. We're supposed to maintain eye contact with parties. And with a conscious intent, the mediator approaches the others in the room with compassionate awareness. I mean, I think we all do that. I mean, I do that as a mediator as well, for their thoughts and feelings. Yeah. So as a neutral third party, the mediator is trying to connect with both disputants. So, of course, there's a lot of frustration. There's tension in the room. There's tension in the atmosphere because there's a conflict which has already taken place. There's anger. The opponents are angry with one another. There's fear in the room. There's all sorts of feelings going on. Okay, so this spiritual practice of karuna gives the mediator an understanding of the dynamics in the mediation and a basis upon which the mediator can respond. So being attentive to the attitude and feelings of the parties, the mediator may begin to reduce the fear in the disputants, elicit respect from the participants or the disputants from one another, and encourage hope in the outcome. So through personal warmth and compassionate respect, the mediator builds rapport with the parties. So the mediator consciously models that type of behavior that the parties will be encouraged to show one another during the course of the mediation. So if the mediator brings that compassionate awareness into the room when he starts the mediation, then hopefully the parties will also be encouraged during the course of mediation to maintain that civility between one another during the mediation process. So the other aspect which I can highlight here is the mediator's greeting of the parties. Okay, that people may think, oh, everybody has to greet another, but it creates an initial impression, and first impression matters. So that sets the tone for the entire mediation process. So I think all these things are very important. So a welcome that conveys reciprocal respect and hope for future relationship establishes rapport. Okay, and it also wins trust in the mediator. So they have confidence in the mediator, and it makes it easier for the mediator to conduct the mediation process and elicit respect between the two disputants. And I think when I was reading this article, they said that in the Jewish tradition, they say shalom. It is a greeting of respect. And this greeting of respect allows the mediator to draw the parties out of themselves and move towards a constructive resolution. So in preparing the parties to move towards resolution, the mediator must establish optimism concerning the outcome. So as I said, I'm a Hindu. So the Hindu practice of ahimsa provides a model for creating such a positive attitude. So ahimsa actually means non-injury. And I think you know where I'm going to. So non-injury is non-violence. And of course, our Gandhiji defined ahimsa as equanimity toward all living beings. And for Gandhi, it meant an active process of transforming human hearts so that they value the life force within other beings. So the result is compassion, harmony, and liberation. So through this intentional practice of transformation, the mediator may inspire the parties' compassion for one another and optimism in the mediated possibilities. So this brings us back to Bush and Folger's transformative mediation model, which I spoke about earlier. So it shows that there is some a possibility of actually adopting this model and like what Gandhiji says, that it promotes transformation. So people can be transformed. And that is what Bush and Folger are talking about. And using these are all spiritual practices. So using these spiritual practices, the mediator is able to establish trust and rapport through compassionately assessing the situation and graciously greeting the parties. So the mediator also creates respect and confidence by wisely introducing the parties to the process and by empathetically establishing the procedures. So another Christian belief is non-accusation. So that is another spiritual belief. The mediator also listens to the parties, recounts the facts, and assists them in narrowing the issues instead of playing the blame game or shame game or resorting to any accusation. So if you have this belief or this spiritual belief and incorporate it in your mediation practice, this actually helps the outcome of the mediation. So let me move on to the next stage, which is, so the initial stage was the building of the rapport and the trust. So the next stage would be the negotiation stage of the mediation, where the mediator tries to listen to the parties, foster creativity in a collaborative and cooperative atmosphere, hoping that parties will transform and see each other's point of view and reach some sort of consensus at the end of the day. Now, during this phase, the mediator seeks to develop the parties' awareness of the need for settlement options. And basically, the mediator is going to try very hard to detach the parties from their recalcitrant positions. So trying to make them move from their positions and looking into their interests. What is it they want and why are they there at mediation? So the challenge here for the mediator is to create an atmosphere of cooperation between the parties, where he can ask them to be open, to be flexible, to interact with one another and be creative. That's what we try to do during this stage of the mediation process. And through respect and optimistic anticipation of an amicable resolution, the mediator is able to set the stage for people to be civil to one another, to be honorable, to be earnest in trying to reach some sort of conciliation and a peaceful resolution at the end of the day. So it is very important for the mediator to listen and to hear compassionately. And this is tied up with the earlier part of what I said when I first started about listening, the heart of the mediation itself. So it's all intertwined, actually, when you look at it at the end of the day. It's because we can't judge, we have to listen. Okay. So coming back to that receptive listening, and sometimes keeping quiet helps. Receptive silence, they say, and empathetic listening are encouraged. Okay. And what I want to share is this. I think the mediator has a role, a very huge role to play to open the minds and the hearts of the parties now to alternative perceptions and new possibilities. This is actually an uphill task for the mediator. And in seeking to transform the position which they are in, or the situation which the parties are in, and the mediator must try to do this. The mediator has to excite the imagination of the parties. And he does this with skillful questioning, reality testing, things which the mediator is trained to do by asking doubt-creating questions, by doing reality tests, so that parties come to realization that they cannot be stuck in their positions. So appreciation for the Christian understanding of metanoia may help parties in this instance. So often metanoia is, what it means literally is change of mind, and refers to the casting of the old mind and taking on a new mind. So through a change of heart, a new consciousness is acquired. So the mediator will need to encourage the parties to cultivate an open mind throughout the negotiations. As I said, this is not an easy task. And to aid this process, the mediator might point out unspoken perceptions, identify unspoken attitudes among the parties, and by giving voice to those silent aspects of the dispute. So the mediator has to be skillful to do all these things, to open up the heart, to open up the mind of the parties and the soul of the parties. And the mediator and parties may break away from their entrenched problems and to envision positive or possible resolutions by generating as many options as possible. But all this is done with the help of the mediator, of course, by trying to open up the heart and the mind and the soul by asking reality testing questions. And maybe spiritually, we need to do more training ourselves to ask that kind of questions and to be able to impart that to the disputants as well. So the mediator also has to inspire the parties to think creatively. So the mediator must assist the parties in exploring these possible changes in their relationship, assessing these options by moving it to the next stage. So moving on to the next stage of the mediation process, which is the part where the mediator may actually break off into a caucus session or a private session and try to generate options for settlement. So in this stage, the mediator has to assist parties to put forward some options, and if there are options, to try and evaluate these options. So the parties must determine what is it that they really want, what best meets their needs and wants. So the mediator has to have a principle of, there's a principle of collective responsibility here, which may aid the mediator in the part and the parties in achieving this. So in this aspect, the Hindu tradition, there's a concept called yajna, or sacrifice. So according to Gandhi again, it is not possible for one person or group to harm another without injuring themselves. So human beings are interdependent according to Gandhi, and all persons owe their humanity to others and their existence to a world they did not create. So for this reason, Gandhi believed all persons to be debtors, unable to repay the benefits of their existence. So he believed people must do continual yajna by accepting collective responsibility to live peacefully. So as Gandhi said, no one takes another down a pit without descending into it himself and sinning in the bargain. Okay. So this understanding of yajna provides a means for the mediator to encourage the parties to realistically assess the options which have been put forward by the parties during the mediation, and which has been presented by their opponent, and to honestly assess the impact of these settlement offers. So the wise mediator will invite the parties to do in caucus to do a reality check, the reality test which I spoke about earlier, asking them whether the other party is likely to accept the offer. So we are trained to do this reality checks during the caucus sessions. So the mediator will also inquire as to whether a particular settlement option will foster further disagreement, or is it going to be something positive, or is it going to be something negative. We do our Vetna and Vetna checks, as we say, our alternative checks with the parties. So as much as possible, what the mediator will want to encourage is to interact directly with one another. So face-to-face interaction, exchanging needs and interests with the other parties is encouraged. And that is taking into account the spiritual concept of yajna as propounded by the Hindu practice, by Gandhi, and it also serves to facilitate, doing these reality checks also actually facilitates the reconciliation process between the parties, and because we need to humanize the parties to one another in order to make them transform and accept this as a way of resolving their one's dispute. So to assist constructive interaction, another Buddhism actually offers the practice of metta. Metta means loving, kindness, cultivating goodwill towards others. So this metta is accomplished through compassionate actions performed in a spirit of compassion for the other. So the mediator can model loving kindness both by the way in which he treats the other party. So this is again not easy if you find that parties are very hostile towards one another during the mediation process. And but it will be very necessary for the mediator to positively monitor and guide the parties' interactions if bullying or other disrespectful interchange occurs during the mediation process. So the mediator has to do this gently, of course, to try and diffuse the situation or irritation or whatever is going on, and try and deflect the toxic language or interaction which is going on between the parties in the room. So I would like to conclude by saying that spirituality has practical value to mediators and parties engaged in the mediation process. Of course, it is some of the examples which I cited above with, of what Buddhism's preaches and what Gandhi said and what Hindu practices say. But these are not only in Hinduism, are not practices only practiced by Hindus or Buddhists. But I think in all major religions, I think they have this thread of what I just cited. So these spiritual practices provide a means of understanding and dealing with mediation challenges. But to introduce spirituality in mediation can be very, very challenging. And mediators, I believe, have to be trained to do that, because we need to think out of the box as well. And we need to be trained how to tap on our spirit and our soul and let go of our ego. So I think that is the difficult thing, Vikram. And in a mediation that utilizes a spiritual approach, I don't know whether anybody has tried. Maybe you can ask your upcoming speakers, and especially Ken Cloke today in his keynote speech, whether he practices a spiritual approach during his mediation, because the hallmark of a successful mediation is whether the parties have grown spiritually. If you are going to adopt this spiritual approach or model of mediation, and spiritual growth might be reflected by increased feelings of peace or love towards others, or an increased recognition of the interconnectedness of all things sacred. So it may be signified by a greater understanding of how one's ego can interfere with leading a spiritual life, or by a change in the shape of one's awareness. So a spiritually successful mediation might be one where the parties can learn that they can trust their soul's guidance, and that relating to each other as fellow spiritual beings results in more loving and productive relationships at the end of the day. And if a resolution has been reached, perhaps the outcome is one that neither party could have imagined, and reflects the benefit of calling on the divine for assistance. Thank you, Vikram.
Lovely, lovely, Guna. This is exactly what was expected from you. All that structured approach, I think, is really important. I think you put it down, definitions and everything. But these were what we were kind of struggling with in terms of, or in the sense, everyone obviously looks at it from a different perspective, and spirituality, yes, definitely. But interesting thing is, in the greeting, you missed out the namaste.
Oh, yes, of course, not shalom. And our namaste. Yes. And
it's a very important part of it, because what does it mean? Obviously, of course, if you get into it, there'll be lots of interpretations and everything. But basically it means I bow to you, and the divine in me in some way honors the divine in you. So I think that is also, like you said,
our Vanakkam greeting.
Yeah, exactly.
And today is Tamil New Year, and I think Vasaki as well.
Yep.
So Happy New Year
Happy
to
New
you.
Year. Happy New Year to you too.
I should have started with that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the important thing, Guna, you said in terms of the a little bit of get into the pronunciation, because we actually pronounce it yagna.
Oh, yagna. Oh, sorry, not yajna. Sorry. Oh, it's
no,
a silent. It's a silent.
No, in the sense, actually, these pronunciations, because they're difficult, everyone can't get the yagna part, so it became easier. Same thing with your name. I keep telling you, your name is actually Gunavathi. Guna means you have very good, qualities and everything. So that's Gunavathi, you're filled with it. So that's how it is. It's it's actually Gunavathi for me, but obviously I have to say Gunavathi because that's the way you like your name. So that, but you said, look, that in terms of practicing it, it might be difficult for you, and you'll have to maybe train or whatever. No, I'm saying it, not at all. The way I look at it, because you come from the heart, you're a beautiful soul, and you're spiritual. So all those things will come with it. I mean, the point is you might not even know this, but they're coming with you and they're part of you. And for that, in terms of training, is what you say. I say that your upbringing, your value system that you have been brought up in, and that's why that's important. That's why I was saying, if you get a little bit into yourself, and I mean, how much, whatever, certain things you also won't know because you've been imbibing it as you grew up. But that by itself, let's call that training, if it's training. But it's the way you are conditioned, the what you pick up from it. Everyone in your family, or if you had siblings, won't pick up the same thing. So what you picked up and what you bring with you, I think that's really important. And to be able to, I don't know whether you can actually train. That's what I'm saying, in the sense of putting someone through it. I'm thinking you can make the person discover those aspects of themselves. I don't
I
know.
think one has to discover these aspects on their own. But some people need a nudge. Some people need a nudge. So of course, I bring all these values onto the table when I mediate. But the question is it enough to actually, touch on the soul and the spirit?
That's the connection.
That's a different level. Yeah. I'm talking about that level, which is difficult to practice.
No, I feel if you come from the heart and you are a beautiful soul and the spirituality of it, that connection is happening. Because obviously we don't have ways to check those connections, because obviously they're there and you can't test it through any kind of a gauge or meter or anything like that. But it's always happening. And the transformative aspect, according to me, just happens because of that, because the connections are made. But to be able to reach out to that soul, and whether that soul wants to reach out or not, and to connect to the heart, obviously that part of it, how much really can happen, how much of your spirituality can help in that, I think those are things which definitely we'll, of course, we will be discussing. But right now you use the word table, on the mediation table. And with Sarah, we just had the discussion, and very nicely she used the word mediation tree. And that's exactly what I've been trying to say. Then let's open it out. Let's open out the whole concept. So I think that's really important. But when you spoke about listening, and really important listening. But when you're saying listening, now listening from the heart, that's one thing. Listening to the soul,
Yes.
first of all, is the soul willing to speak? That's about, obviously it's to that soul. But to listen to the soul, I think a lot of people maybe miss out on that, maybe. And this is where I feel spirituality comes in. To be able to listen to the soul, you have to be, I don't know what all it takes. I mean, I also be, in terms of theoretical part, you are the academician and you know all those words. I would not, but I think there is something there which connects. I don't know how you look at it.
I don't know whether, of course, there is something there which connects, but how do you bring it out? As I said, that the ego is in the way. So we need to get rid of that ego to be able to get through to the soul and the spirit.
I think the important one that has been left. Oh, I did not want to get into it. Actually, mind, heart, soul, spirituality. I think the mind is what comes in the way. That's what.
That's the ego.
Exactly. So I think that's
why I spoke about the ego bit, because I think once ego gets in the way, then it actually scuttles everything. I mean, we all know that. And most disputes which don't settle is because people are egotistical and they become stuck and they become recalcitrant disputants because the ego gets in the way. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's how that's where the connectivity between the heart and the soul may find a challenge, because to reach the soul, before you can, so
absolutely, I think that's exactly, and that's why I'm saying mind, because a lot of factors, like you said, prejudices, biases, ego, a lot of those aspects are the mind aspect of it. So to be able to bring that mind part of it out of it and connect to heart, soul, and of course through your spirituality, I think that's really important. So I don't know, I don't want to expand the the topic. I don't want to say mind, I don't want to add mind there, but I think that's the one which is creating that issue, and that's the one we have to deal with. Everything else will flow.
The mind, the heart. Well, I don't think you should change the topic now.
No. But I think, but on this aspect that you said, not show the emotions, because I feel, I mean, again, this discussion with Sarah just before you was actually on this, that be like you said, like if the person is crying and sometimes you want to, or you do cry with that person, is that taking away from the process? So there important connection was coming up with trust, because the parties have trusted you, and she says if you are trusted, you can take the process in a very different manner. So then I think these aspects of that omnipartiality, multi-partiality, whatever words that are there, and instead of neutrality, are we going to expand it to that level or not? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I suppose it's that's a different level altogether already. Because if when you talk about trust and the parties, as I started earlier to say, that you at the beginning stage, the mediator has to build that rapport and trust with the parties. But we do not know what level the trust is at during the course of the mediation. So if one party cries and the mediator cries along, or maybe even hugs the person, or shows some sort of empathy in front of the other party, of course, there are two schools of thought, whether the mediator has actually crossed the line. And if you cry with the other side, what is the perception of the other person sitting in the room? Will he think that you are biased, or will he think that you have taken the other party's side? So the mediator may have crossed the line. That's my view. I think that even though we want to show our human side, even if we want to show that our soul and spirit has reached out to this person, I think the mediator still has to draw that line, and that we should not cross the line. Because we really don't know. When you talk about trust, it's so subjective. We don't know what level of trust we're talking about. Because that may then play in the mind of the other disputant sitting in the room. I don't know, that's my view.
Because Guna, what the thing is that one, of course, when you bring your authentic self, then whatever emotions of the mediator, they come in with those as authentic self. But also we were looking at it. Of course, the discussion is a much wider discussion on mediation, because to one part we were discussing indigenous communities, because she does work with indigenous communities. So in disputes or conflicts in those communities now, are those a part of the community and not individuals? So this whole individualistic
I see.
concept, I mean, I'm just looking at it from the wider perspective, that because thing is that mediation as such always gets discussed in that whole individualistic approach.
Correct.
And of course it's much wider than that. It's going to take place in
Definitely.
various scenarios. So to be able to discuss the wider aspect also was important, because it's not going to be limited to only those issues where
I
only
agree. But
and
I have not done that types of mediation. I have not, but there is there are indigenous tribes in Malaysia as well, especially in East Malaysia. And I have actually been consulted on some mediation in respect of land matters for the indigenous people, where of course you have to look at them collectively as a tribe, and they're and when there's a dispute on land, it becomes a very serious matter, and it has to be done collectively, not individually. And there was some mediation. I am aware that they have mediated some of these disputes, but I do not know whether it was successful. And in those sort of situations, I think it's on a different level altogether. And like what you said.
and also to bring those elements into other aspects. I'm like, of course the individualist aspect will always come in, and whether is it actually only individualistic or individuals, or the larger society and community otherwise are also affected by those, and to have that whole connection with the community, and that social pressure which I was speaking about I mean, I've spoken about this, that is social pressure a bad thing? Are we moving away from it? Of course, moving away from communities definitely has happened. Social pressure has gone away. I mean, I'm saying as changes happened, maybe urbanization is an aspect, or the way society got structured. So I think that a part of it, should we just move away from it and say that, look, okay, in cases of indigenous communities or communities in general, this applies, but you should not bring these aspects into otherwise into mediations. So, I mean, these are discussions. I mean, just thoughts out there as to how you have to look at the process, because like you said, finally it will come down to, again, like a little, the mediator being removed and being there to show neutrality and to look as impartial, to just look at, I mean, so that the feeling goes out. Is that a correct approach or not? I mean, that's what the whole symposium was for, to discuss those
Yeah.
aspects.
It's open to debate, I suppose. There's no one right answer. There's no one right answer.
Exactly. So the whole, I mean, the idea is to have those discussions, and then what we'll do is, let's have one concluding kind of a session at the end of the symposium, and then whatever has been learned or whatever points came out, I think maybe we can have a discussion on those. That should be also done, because that's also important. What are the learnings and key takeaways, which we did in the last one also? I think we need to also do that.
Yeah, the takeaways are important. Yeah. So thank you very much for inviting me again, Vikram, to share my views. And we shall end with
Namaste. I bow to you, and the divine in me honors the divine in you.
Thank you very much, and a very happy new year to you.
Thank you very much, Guna.
Wishing you a fabulous year ahead.
Thank you very much. And you